The Galactic Council convened in a state of emergency. For centuries, they had ruled the stars, their collective wisdom guiding countless civilizations across the cosmos. Wars were rare, and when they did occur, they were handled with calculated precision, disputes settled with overwhelming technological superiority, diplomacy backed by fleets of ships so advanced that resistance was futile. But today, something had changed. A new species had entered the galactic stage, one previously overlooked as insignificant. Their world was a backwater in a quiet corner of the Orion Arm, a planet plagued by internal conflicts, primitive politics, and an unremarkable technological trajectory. At least, that was what the Council had believed. Now, a massive holographic projection hovered above the chamber, displaying a warship unlike anything they had seen before. It was human in design, blocky, brutalist, and covered in thick armor plating. It lacked the elegance of an elven craft, the organic fluidity of a Sylvani vessel, or the mathematical precision of a Zelvar dreadnought. It was ugly, and yet it radiated an undeniable menace. This cannot be, murmured High Chancellor Varelian, his silken robes rustling as he turned to his advisors. How did the humans build such a thing? They were barely capable of interstellar travel a century ago. The council chamber was filled with murmurs of disbelief. The warship, christened Indomitable, had arrived at the edge of council space only hours ago, its arrival triggering every warning system in the sector. It hadn't fired a shot. It hadn't made any demands. It simply existed. And that alone was enough to shake the foundations of the galaxy's ruling elite. Grand Strategist Threxar, a member of the reptilian Qatar Dominion, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. Perhaps they have stolen technology. There is no way they could have developed this on their own. His voice dripped with disdain. Humans are chaotic, violent, and short-sighted, a species prone to self-destruction. Ambassador Nira of the Sylvani Collective shook her head. And yet, there it is, she said softly, gesturing to the projection. A warship larger than anything our fleets have, heavily armed, heavily shielded, and moving with a purpose. A cold silence settled over the chamber. Then, the central communication terminal flickered to life. A transmission had been received. From the humans. All eyes turned toward the display as the image resolved into a figure clad in dark navy blue fabric, adorned with golden insignia. A human. A leader. His expression was unreadable, yet his eyes carried a cold, calculating intelligence that sent a chill through the council. "This is Admiral Jonathan Kane of the United Terran Navy," the human said, his voice steady. "We are here as a courtesy. We are aware of the treaties in place regarding first contact protocols, and we respect them. However," he paused, letting the moment stretch before continuing, "humanity will not be ignored any longer." The chamber erupted into chaos. The council chamber was in turmoil. Voices overlapped, whispers of disbelief turning into heated debates. A species as young as humanity, bold enough to send a warship directly into council-controlled space? It was unthinkable, arrogant. And yet, there Admiral Jonathan Kane stood, staring back at them through the massive holographic display, waiting. High Chancellor Varelian raised a trembling hand, calling for silence. The chamber slowly quieted, though the tension remained thick. He straightened his posture and faced the human directly. "Admiral Kane," he began carefully, his voice a practiced blend of authority and diplomacy. "You arrive unannounced aboard a vessel that defies all expectations. This Indomitable of yours, it is a warship, is it not?" Kane gave a slow nod. "That's correct, Chancellor." Varelian frowned. "And yet, you claim this is a courtesy visit? Do you understand what such an action implies?" The Admiral's lips twitched, though it was not quite a smile. I do. And I also understand what would have happened if we had arrived in anything less than a warship. A silence followed. The meaning was clear. For centuries, first contact encounters had always been dictated by the Council's strength. New species were greeted not with open arms, but with a subtle display of power, swiftly shown their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Some were granted limited autonomy, others were guided into the fold. But humanity had seen through the game, and instead of bowing, they had arrived with a ship designed to survive. Grand Strategist Threxar's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. His scaled lip curled in irritation. "You presume too much, human," he hissed. "We have ruled these stars for thousands of cycles. We have seen countless civilizations rise and fall, long before your kind even grasped the concept of spaceflight. You are nothing but—" Kane cut him off. "With all due respect, strategist, we are not like the others." The chamber tensed. No species had ever dared speak to Threxar with such directness. The human admiral leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "You see, our history has not been one of peace and harmony. We did not emerge under the watchful guidance of an elder race. We were not handed knowledge by benevolent overseers. We have fought for everything, against our own kind, against the elements, against the very nature of existence itself." He gestured subtly behind him, where a tactical display of Indomitable remained in view. "This warship represents what humanity is capable of when faced with an impossible challenge. You may have ruled these stars for thousands of cycles, but we have spent millennia learning how to survive against all odds." The weight of his words settled upon the council. Ambassador Nira, who had remained silent thus far, now spoke, her voice calm yet curious. "You speak of survival, Admiral, and yet you are here, not as a conqueror, not as a supplicant, but as— what exactly?" Kane finally smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only a razor-sharp certainty. "As a warning." Varelian's breath hitched. The chamber fell into a stunned hush once more. The Admiral continued. "For years, we have monitored Council-controlled space. We have seen how you treat those weaker than you, how you dictate the terms of their progress, how you decide who thrives and who remains stagnant." His voice grew colder. "That era is over." Threxar shot to his feet. "You dare threaten the Galactic Council?" Kane didn't even flinch. "Number I state a simple fact." He clasped his hands behind his back, his stance exuding confidence. "We have no desire for war, but we will not be assimilated, nor will we allow ourselves to be dictated to. Humanity will not kneel." He leaned in slightly. "And if anyone here thinks otherwise, I invite them to try." The hologram flickered off. The chamber sat in stunned silence, every leader present now faced with an undeniable truth. Humanity had arrived, and they were not afraid. The silence in the council chamber was thick with tension. No one spoke, no one moved. The holographic projection of Admiral Kane had vanished, but his words still echoed in the minds of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Humanity had made its stance clear. For centuries, the Galactic Council had dictated the terms of civilization, shaping the fates of species that ascended to the stars. Some were allowed to integrate peacefully, others were subjugated quietly, and a select few were destroyed before they ever posed a threat. It had always been this way. It was supposed to remain this way. But now, for the first time in living memory, an emerging species had looked upon the Council's authority and rejected it outright. High Chancellor Varelian finally broke the silence. "This changes everything." Grand Strategist Threxar sneered, his reptilian features twisting with contempt. "Number it changes nothing." He slammed a clawed fist against the table. "This is a single warship, nothing more, an overcompensation from a fledgling race that knows it cannot compete in true warfare. Ambassador Nira tilted her head. You truly believe that? Threxar's slit pupils narrowed. I know it. Humanity is a young species, barely out of its cradle. They lack the infrastructure, the fleets, the logistical prowess to wage war against a galactic empire. One warship does not make them our equal. And yet, it is here. All eyes turned to the speaker, Lord Magistrate Velos of the Zelvar Dominion. His species, known for their cold intellect and mathematical precision, rarely spoke unless necessary. Velos regarded Threxar with a calculated expression. A single warship sent alone into council space, he said, not to surrender, not to seek guidance, but to warn us. He folded his hands. The implications of such an act should not be dismissed so easily. Threxar scoffed. Implications? They are posturing, bluffing. They know that if they act against us, we will wipe them from existence. Veilos's gaze did not waver. Are you certain of that? Threxar bared his fangs. Do not insult me, Magistrate. Velos remained unfazed. I state only the obvious. There are unknown variables at play. His glowing blue eyes flickered toward the massive hologram of Indomitable, still suspended above the chamber. Consider this. Humanity has advanced centuries beyond what our projections predicted. How? No one answered. We assumed their species was primitive, that they would struggle with interstellar expansion for another 1,000 cycles at least. Velos leaned forward slightly. Yet here they are, presenting a vessel that defies expectations, a warship built for prolonged engagement. The question is not whether humanity is a threat now, but how they reached this point without us noticing. A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. With all due respect, strategist, we are not like the others. The chamber tensed. No species had ever dared speak to Threxar with such directness. The human admiral leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. You see, our history has not been one of peace and harmony. We did not emerge under the watchful guidance of an elder race. We were not handed knowledge by benevolent overseers. We have fought for everything, against our own kind, against the elements, against the very nature of existence itself. He gestured subtly behind him, where a tactical display of Indomitable remained in view. This warship represents what humanity is capable of when faced with an impossible challenge. You may have ruled these stars for thousands of cycles, but we have spent millennia learning how to survive against all odds. The weight of his words settled upon the council. Ambassador Nira, who had remained silent thus far, now spoke, her voice calm yet curious. You speak of survival, Admiral, and yet you are here, not as a conqueror, not as a supplicant, but as what exactly? Kane finally smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only a razor-sharp certainty. As a warning, Varelian's breath hitched. The chamber fell into a stunned hush once more. The Admiral continued. For years, we have monitored Council-controlled space. We have seen how you treat those weaker than you, how you dictate the terms of their progress, how you decide who thrives and who remains stagnant. His voice grew colder. That era is over. Threxar shot to his feet. You dare threaten the Galactic Council? Kane didn't even flinch. Number I state a simple fact. He clasped his hands behind his back, his stance exuding confidence. We have no desire for war, but we will not be assimilated, nor will we allow ourselves to be dictated to. Humanity will not kneel. He leaned in slightly. And if anyone here thinks otherwise, I invite them to try. The hologram flickered off. The chamber sat in stunned silence, every leader present now faced with an undeniable truth. Humanity had arrived, and they were not afraid. The silence in the council chamber was thick with tension. No one spoke, no one moved. The holographic projection of Admiral Kane had vanished, but his words still echoed in the minds of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Humanity had made its stance clear. For centuries, the Galactic Council had dictated the terms of civilization, shaping the fates of species that ascended to the stars. Some were allowed to integrate peacefully, others were subjugated quietly, and a select few were destroyed before they ever posed a threat. It had always been this way. It was supposed to remain this way. But now, for the first time in living memory, an emerging species had looked upon the Council's authority and rejected it outright. High Chancellor Varelian finally broke the silence. "This changes everything." Grand Strategist Threxar sneered, his reptilian features twisting with contempt. "Number it changes nothing." He slammed a clawed fist against the table. "This is a single warship, nothing more. An overcompensation from a fledgling race that knows it cannot compete in true warfare." Ambassador Nira tilted her head. "You truly believe that?" Threxar's slit pupils narrowed. "I know it. Humanity is a young species, barely out of its cradle. They lack the infrastructure, the fleets, the logistical prowess to wage war against a galactic empire. One warship does not make them our equal. And yet, it is here." All eyes turned to the speaker, Lord Magistrate Velos of the Zelvar Dominion. His species, known for their cold intellect and mathematical precision, rarely spoke unless necessary. Velos regarded Threxar with a calculated expression. "A single warship sent alone into council space," he said, "not to surrender, not to seek guidance, but to warn us." He folded his hands. The implications of such an act should not be dismissed so easily. Threxar scoffed. "Implications? They are posturing, bluffing. They know that if they act against us, we will wipe them from existence." Vilos's gaze did not waver. "Are you certain of that?" Threxar bared his fangs. "Do not insult me, Magistrate." Velos remained unfazed. "I state only the obvious. There are unknown variables at play." His glowing blue eyes flickered toward the massive hologram of Indomitable, still suspended above the chamber. "Consider this. Humanity has advanced centuries beyond what our projections predicted. How?" No one answered. "We assumed their species was primitive, that they would struggle with interstellar expansion for another 1,000 cycles at least." Velos leaned forward slightly. "Yet here they are, presenting a vessel that defies expectations, a warship built for prolonged engagement. The question is not whether humanity is a threat now, but how they reached this point without us noticing." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. "Your arrogance will be your downfall," the Qatar strategist spat. "You speak as if your species is untouchable, but let me remind you, you are alone. We could destroy your Indomitable in minutes." Kane exhaled slowly, as if he had been waiting for those words. "Could you?" A beat of silence. Then, with a flick of his hand, Kane activated a secondary display. A new series of markers appeared on the tactical map, this time behind the Council fleet. Varelian's breath caught. Threxar's sneer faltered. One by one, human warships began decloaking. Not just one, not just a dozen, hundreds. They had been waiting, silent, invisible, perfectly positioned, and now the hunters had become the hunted. Kane's voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "I suggest you rethink your position, gentlemen." For the first time in history, the Council was no longer the most powerful force in the galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and they had come prepared. The Council fleet stood frozen in space. A moment ago, they had been the undisputed power in this confrontation. Now they were surrounded. Hundreds of human warships, sleek and deadly, had emerged from the void like specters. Their formations were tight, disciplined. Not a single ship moved out of line. This was not an accident. This was not a bluff. This was intentional. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Kane allowed the silence to stretch. He knew the psychological weight of a perfectly timed maneuver. Let them feel it. Let them understand what they were dealing with. Varelian's composed mask cracked, his eyes darting across the tactical display. Threxar, on the other hand, seethed with fury. "Impossible," he growled. "You were hiding these ships? Under our noses?" Kane remained impassive. "You assumed we were primitive. You assumed we were disorganized. You assumed you knew everything about us." He let those words linger before delivering the final blow. "You assumed wrong." Varelian exhaled sharply, his mind racing. The Council's intelligence had failed them. The humans had built an armada in secret, undetected beyond the Council's reach. It defied everything they believed about the natural order. Threxar bared his teeth. This is treachery, trickery." His claws curled into fists. "The Council will not tolerate deception from a lesser species." Kane's expression remained unreadable. A lesser species? He glanced at the display of the Council fleet, now surrounded, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. "Is that still what you think?" Threxar's nostrils flared. His pride demanded action, but even he was not blind to reality. If they fired first, the battle would be devastating, for both sides, and humanity was willing to fight. Varelian straightened his posture, regaining a measure of control. His voice was steady but strained. "Admiral Kane, we are now at a dangerous precipice." Kane nodded. "That we are." Varelian took a slow breath. "What is it that you want?" Kane studied the Chancellor carefully. This was the moment, the one that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. He stepped forward. "We want nothing from you." His voice was calm, but resolute. "We do not seek your approval. We do not seek your guidance. We do not need your permission." He let the weight of those words settle before continuing. "We are here to state a simple fact. Humanity is now a power in this galaxy. We will not be conquered. We will not be controlled. We will not kneel." Varelian's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Kane clasped his hands behind his back. "We will not fire unless fired upon. But know this, if a single human life is threatened, we will respond." His eyes met Varelian's. "And we will not lose." A charged silence followed. The Council had never faced a moment like this before. Never had a species declared its independence without asking. Never had a species entered their domain without fear. Humanity had done both. Varelian closed his eyes for a moment, then exhaled. "I see." He turned toward Threxar, who looked ready to explode with rage. "Stand down." Threxar's head snapped toward him. "You cannot be serious." Varelian's gaze was hard. "Do you wish to test them now, here, at this moment?" Threxar's jaw tightened. He wanted to fight. But he was not a fool. He could see the truth as clearly as anyone else in the chamber. A battle today would not end with a Council victory. At best, it would end with everyone burning. With a snarl, Threxar slammed his fist against the table. "This is not over, human." Kane nodded once. "I never expected it to be." The communication link cut. The Council fleet remained motionless for several moments longer before slowly, reluctantly, retreating from the system. On the bridge of the Indomitable, a ripple of tension eased through the crew. They had done it. Humanity had not just survived its first encounter with the galactic powers. It had won. Commander Grant exhaled, shaking her head. They'll be back, won't they? Kane watched the council ships vanish into the void. Yes, he said quietly. And next time, it would be war. But humanity would be ready. They always were. The council's retreat did not bring relief, only a heavier sense of foreboding. Humanity had made its declaration, but in the halls of power, words were just the first step. The real battle would come later. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, hands still clasped behind his back, watching as the last council ships vanished into the void. The silence that followed was not peace. It was preparation. "Orders, sir?" Commander Grant asked. Kane turned, his expression unreadable. "We leave." Grant hesitated. "We're just going to leave, after all that?" Kane nodded. "We made our point. There's no need to stay and tempt a mistake. Besides," he turned back toward the viewport, "they won't forget this, and they won't forgive it." She exhaled. "No, I don't imagine they will." The bridge crew remained silent, exchanging glances. Humanity had always fought its battles with overwhelming force, but this was different. This was a war of perception, a war of power before a single shot was fired. As the Indomitable prepared for departure, a secure transmission came through, bypassing the usual council channels. A rogue signal, a shadow whisper. Kane's eyes narrowed as the encrypted message flickered onto his personal console. He gestured for Grant to hold the ship's departure. He read the message. Then he read it again. A slow, knowing smile crept across his face. "We are not alone. The Galactic Council may have ruled for millennia, but even empires cast shadows. And in those shadows, something had been watching. Waiting." The encrypted message was short, but it was enough. There were others. Species who had chafed under the Council's rule, who had lived as second-class citizens, forced into submission. They had watched humanity's arrival with quiet fascination. And now they saw something they had never dared to hope for. A possibility. A species willing to defy the Council. A species that did not beg for a seat at the table, but instead built its own. The message was an invitation. A meeting, deep within neutral space. A gathering of those who had long whispered of resistance, but never had the power to act. Until now. Kane tapped his fingers against the console, considering. This changed everything. "Commander," he said. Grant turned, eyebrows raised. "Sir?" "Change course. We're not heading home?" She frowned. "Then where?" Kane leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the weight of something far greater than a simple confrontation. "To see just how many others are ready to stand with us." The Indomitable turned, its engines burning bright against the void. The war hadn't started yet. But the resistance had just begun. The Indomitable cut through the void, its engines humming with restrained power as it left the Council's territory behind. Humanity had drawn the line, made its stance clear, but now something even more dangerous was unfolding. Admiral Kane reread the message on his private console. Coordinates encrypted, time-sensitive, no direct transmissions, no unnecessary attention. "We are waiting." The invitation was clear. Someone, or something, had been watching, and now they were reaching out. "Commander," Kane said, his voice calm but firm. Grant turned from her station. "Course plotted, but I don't like this, sir. We have no idea who we're meeting." "Neither do they." Kane folded his arms. "Which makes us even." The crew had been expecting to return home, to regroup, to prepare for the inevitable war with the Council. But this was unexpected. "Sir," Lieutenant Voss, the ship's intelligence officer, spoke up. "We've done some initial scans on the coordinates. The system is a dead zone. No registered colonies, no official trade routes." He hesitated. "Which means if something is there, It's been kept off every known record. Kane nodded. That was the point. The Council's reach was vast, but not absolute. There were always places beyond their control, places that had been forgotten or erased from the records. That's where rebellion grew. "Any signs of a trap?" he asked. Voss shook his head. "Nothing yet, but it's a good place for an ambush." Grant crossed her arms. "And we're just walking into it?" Kane turned toward the viewport, watching the distant stars slip past. "We didn't come this far just to play it safe." The system was dark. A dying star flickered weakly in the distance, bathing the scattered asteroids and frozen moons in a dim, reddish glow. There were no signs of civilization, no beacon signals, no planetary settlements, nothing. And yet, the Indomitable was not alone. "Contacts," Voss announced, his voice clipped. 5 ships. Decloaking. On the tactical display, dark shapes flickered into existence. They weren't Council vessels. Their hulls were patchwork, a blend of different designs and technologies. Some were old warships, others modified civilian freighters, each one bearing the scars of a life spent on the run. These weren't conquerors, these were survivors. The comms channel crackled to life. "Terran warship, you are expected," a voice said. It was calm, measured, but laced with something deeper: determination. "Transmit authorization code." Kane didn't hesitate. He sent the encrypted response embedded in the message they'd received. A brief silence. Then, "Welcome to the Ghost Fleet." The largest of the ships, a heavily modified battleship, powered its engines and guided the Indomitable toward a hidden structure nestled within the shadows of a shattered moon. As they approached, Kane saw what had been kept hidden for so long. A fleet. Not the polished, unified strength of a galactic empire, but something different. A force built from remnants, ships from species long thought to be under the Council's heel. Fighters bearing insignias of civilizations that had supposedly been integrated, and others that belonged to no known government at all. This was not an army. This was a movement. As the Indomitable moved into formation, Kane exhaled slowly. We are not alone. And if humanity had been the first to stand against the Council openly, they would not be the last. The docking bay of the hidden base was dimly lit, the glow of maintenance lights reflecting off the patchwork hulls of battle-worn ships. The air smelled of coolant, metal, and something older, like a place that had seen war but never surrendered to it. As Admiral Kane stepped off the Indomitable, he was met with silence. No formal greeting, no honor guard, just the quiet scrutiny of those who had been waiting in the shadows far longer than humanity had been in the stars. Then, from the gathered figures, a man stepped forward. He was tall, his features sharp and worn by years of conflict. His uniform, if it could be called that, was a mix of different military styles, patched together like his fleet. But his eyes were steady, like a man who had seen civilizations fall and still refused to break. "You're late," the man said, his voice rough. Kane met his gaze without hesitation. "We came as soon as we received your message." The man studied him for a moment before nodding. "I'm Commander Drell of the Ghost Fleet, and you, Admiral Kane of the Terran Navy, have just set fire to the galaxy's most fragile order." Kane let a small smirk touch his lips. That was the idea. Drell didn't smile back. Instead, he gestured for Kane and his officers to follow. As they walked through the corridors of the station, Kane took in everything: the makeshift repairs, the repurposed technology, the soldiers who carried weapons from a dozen different species. This wasn't just a resistance. It was a graveyard of forgotten wars. You're wondering what this place is, Drell said without looking back. Kane nodded. A hidden fleet, gathered from the remnants of those the Council crushed. Drell gave a short laugh. Not crushed, not yet. He stopped at a reinforced door and keyed in a sequence. The lock disengaged with a hiss, revealing a war room lined with holographic projections of Council-controlled sectors. Scars of conflict marked every sector. Occupied worlds, lost battles, extinct species. And yet, among the red zones of Council control, Kane noticed something else. Clusters of systems marked in deep gray, unclaimed, hidden. Drell saw where his eyes lingered. You thought you were alone, he said. You're not. Kane exhaled slowly, absorbing the meaning. How long? Drell's expression darkened. Decades, longer for some of us. He pointed to the maps. The Council doesn't tolerate defiance. Those who resist are either wiped out or forced underground. He turned to Kane. Until now, we've had no way to push back. And you think humanity changes that? Kane asked. Drell folded his arms. You already have. The moment you stood up to the Council and didn't break, you became more than a rogue species. You became a symbol. Kane considered this. Symbols don't win wars. No, Drell agreed, but they start them. A heavy silence followed. Kane looked at the gathered leaders, each of them representing a species that had suffered under the Council's rule. Some had been forced into servitude, others had lost entire homeworlds. They had spent years in hiding, waiting for something, someone, to prove that resistance wasn't futile. Now that moment had come. Kane stepped forward, his voice steady. What do you need? Drell's eyes flashed with something close to hope. A fleet that can fight. Kane nodded. Then let's get to work. The war had not begun yet, but the pieces were falling into place. And this time the Council would not see it coming. The war room pulsed with quiet tension. Holographic displays flickered, showing fleet movements, supply routes, and heavily classified data. Information the Council believed long buried. Admiral Kane studied the gathered leaders, each one hardened by years of oppression, exile, or war. They had survived not by overwhelming power, but by learning how to endure, how to hide, how to strike when least expected. But survival was no longer enough. Drell leaned forward, hands braced on the central console. We've harassed the Council's supply lines for years. We've sabotaged their infrastructure, disrupted their operations. But we've never had the numbers or firepower to do more than slow them down. His eyes locked onto Kane's. That's where you come in. Kane exhaled. You want the Terran Navy to lead the charge. Drell didn't blink. You've already started a war, Admiral. The moment the Council saw Indomitable, they realized they weren't the only ones capable of dictating terms. Now they're scrambling, but they'll come back, and when they do, they'll come to break you. Kane nodded. We expected as much. Drell straightened. Then we hit them first. A murmur of approval spread through the room. Some of the gathered leaders, those who had fought for decades without a true chance at victory, saw something different in this moment. Humanity wasn't here to survive. They were here to win. One of the leaders, an older, battle-scarred Osari woman named Yrel, stepped forward. Her species had once been a proud warrior race before the Council deemed them too aggressive and dismantled their fleets. You propose an open engagement? She asked, her voice deep and wary. A full-scale assault? Kane shook his head. Not yet. Drell raised an eyebrow. Then what? Kane activated the display, pulling up a specific system on the holographic map. It was a Council-controlled industrial sector, heavily fortified yet far from the core worlds. The perfect target. We cut their supply lines, Kane said. We hit them where they're weakest. If they want to bring the full might of the Council down on us, Let's make sure they bleed for it first. Ural bared her teeth in something close to a smile. You fight like a predator, Admiral. Kane smirked. Number, I fight like a human. Drell studied the map, then nodded. It's a good plan, but the moment we hit them, they'll know we're more than scattered rebels. They already know that, Kane countered. Now it's time to show them what that really means. Drell exhaled, then extended a hand. Then let's make this official. Kane clasped his forearm in a firm grip. The room seemed to shift in that moment, no longer just a gathering of survivors, but the beginning of something greater. The first true coalition against the Galactic Council. The first step toward war. And for the first time in centuries, the Council was about to be afraid. The Indomitable moved into formation with the Ghost Fleet, a silent predator among the scattered remnants of lost civilizations. What had once been a ragtag collection of fugitives and exiles was now reorganizing into something else. Something with a purpose. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge, arms crossed, watching as the fleet coordinated its first operation. Across the tactical display, ship movements were being calculated, attack vectors planned. Their first target, Sivath 4, an industrial hub deep in Council-controlled space. It was a planet dedicated to shipbuilding, docks, refineries, and military installations. If they struck hard and fast, they wouldn't just cripple production, they would send a message. Kane turned to Commander Grant. Fleet status? Grant didn't look up from her console. Most ships are battle-ready, but they're not used to large-scale engagements. This will be the first time many of them fight in formation. Kane nodded. We'll give them a simple plan. On the war table, he marked the attack vectors. 3 strike teams. 1 will disable the orbital shipyards. Another will cut off planetary defenses. The third, Indomitable and key assets, will engage their fleet directly. Drell, standing at the other side of the table, studied the plan. A direct engagement? His voice carried a mix of approval and warning. We don't have numbers on our side. We don't need numbers, Kane replied. We need a lesson. Drell exhaled. You're making this personal. Kane's gaze hardened. It is personal. For too long, the Council had dictated which species thrived and which ones withered in the dark. They had wiped out resistance movements before they could begin, crushed rebellions before they could form. Not this time. A silent tension filled the war room as the final preparations were made. The countdown to departure began. Sivath 4 wouldn't know what hit them. Sivath 4 Orbital Defense Command. The control officers in the station were completely unprepared for what came next. One moment, the skies over Sivath 4 were clear. The next, the void was filled with burning engines and incoming warships. Alarms blared as the station scrambled its defenses. Council cruisers powered up their weapons. Planetary shields came online. But it was already too late. From the blackness of space, the Indomitable surged forward, its massive guns spitting fire. Shock cannons ripped through the first defensive platforms, tearing metal apart like paper. Strike teams followed behind, weaving between the chaos, disabling key installations before they could mount a response. For the first time in Council history, they weren't the ones dictating the battle. They were reacting. The planet-wide alert system activated, sending distress signals across the sector. But no reinforcements were coming. The Council had grown complacent, believing no force could challenge them so directly. Now, they were paying the price. Kane stood at the command deck of the Indomitable, watching the battle unfold. Ships burned in the void. Explosions rippled across the orbital yards. Humanity had fired its first real shot, and the war had begun. The battle over Sivath 4 raged with a ferocity the Council had not seen in centuries. The orbital shipyards burned, their skeletal frames collapsing into showers of molten debris. Council cruisers fought back, their advanced weaponry tearing through several Ghost Fleet ships, but the tide had already turned. Admiral Kane watched the tactical display with a steady gaze, his mind sharp and focused. The Indomitable led the charge, its brutalist design shrugging off volleys of plasma fire as it carved a path through the enemy fleet. Strike teams darted between the chaos, planting charges on key installations and retreating before the Council could regroup. Commander Grant's voice cut through the noise of the bridge. Orbital defenses are down to 30%. The shipyards are crippled. We've got their fleet pinned. Kane nodded. Good. Signal the withdrawal. Grant hesitated. Sir, we could finish them here. No, Kane said firmly. This isn't about annihilation. It's about proving a point. Drell's voice crackled over the comms from his own ship. You're pulling back? We've got them on the ropes. Kane's response was calm but unyielding. We've shown them we can hurt them. Now we let them live with it. There was a pause, then Drell grunted in reluctant agreement. Understood. The Coalition fleet executed a precise retreat, vanishing into the void as quickly as they had arrived. Behind them, Sivath 4 smoldered, its once mighty industrial might reduced to wreckage, its defenders left scrambling in confusion and fear. The Council would not forget this day. Days later, the Indomitable and the Ghost Fleet regrouped in the shadow of the dead star system where their alliance had first been forged. The mood aboard the ships was a mix of triumph and grim determination. They had struck a blow, but they all knew what came next. In the war room, Kane stood with Drell, Yrel, and the other leaders. The holographic map now showed a galaxy in flux, Council fleets mobilizing, their outer territories tightening defenses. The attack on Sivath 4 had sent shockwaves through their empire. They'll come for us now, Yrel said, her voice steady but laced with the weight of experience. They'll hunt us to the edges of the stars. Kane met her gaze. Let them try. Drell folded his arms. You've given us something we haven't had in decades, Admiral. A chance. Kane shook his head. Not me. Humanity. And all of you. He stepped toward the map, pointing to the gray zones, the unclaimed systems where resistance still flickered. We've shown the galaxy that the Council isn't invincible. That's all they needed to see. Yrel bared her teeth in a warrior's grin. And now they'll rise. They already are, Kane said. Reports had begun trickling in. Small uprisings on Council-controlled worlds, defectors slipping away to join the fight. The attack had ignited something the Council could not extinguish. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about freedom. Months later, the Galactic Council convened once more, their chamber filled with a palpable sense of dread. High Chancellor Varelian stood before the assembly, his silken robes no longer a symbol of unshakable authority. The humans have allied with the remnants, he said, his voice heavy. Their attack on Sivath 4 was only the beginning. Threxar snarled. Then we crush them. We bring the full might of the Council. No, Varelian interrupted, his tone sharp. We underestimated them once. We will not do so again. He activated a hologram, a map of the galaxy, now dotted with red zones of rebellion. The gray had spread. They've awakened something we cannot control, he said softly. And they will not stop. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in millennia, the Council faced an enemy it could not predict, could not dominate. Far from the Council's reach, the Indomitable led a growing armada through uncharted space. Kane stood on the bridge, staring into the void. Behind him, the Coalition fleet stretched, a mix of human warships and the vessels of those who had chosen to stand with them. Commander Grant approached. "Reports from the outer systems, sir. More are joining us." Kane nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. Good. The war was far from over. The Council would retaliate, and the battles ahead would be brutal. But humanity had done what no other species had dared. They had defied the stars, and in doing so, they had lit a fire that would burn until the galaxy was free, or until everything fell to ashes. The choice was no longer the Council's to make. It was theirs. The first time they came, it wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a war. It was worse. The alien visitors were far beyond us, thousands of years ahead in technology, intelligence, and power. When their massive ships darkened the skies, we thought it was the beginning of something extraordinary, a new era, a future where humanity would finally join the stars. But they didn't come as equals. They didn't come as conquerors either. No, they came with something worse. Pity. They called themselves our benefactors, speaking in calm, condescending tones about how humanity was still young, still fragile. And so they gifted us with their scraps. Outdated reactors, primitive ship parts, old weaponry, things they had long abandoned. It was their way of keeping us beneath them, ensuring that we never posed a threat. The leaders of Earth accepted, desperate to grasp even the smallest piece of alien technology. They called it a new age of prosperity, a golden age of advancement. But to those who saw beyond the smiles and diplomatic handshakes, it was clear. This was no gift. This was a leash. The world changed, but not the way we had hoped. Factories adapted, scientists studied the wreckage, and governments squabbled over who deserved what. The aliens watched with bemused indifference, believing we would do nothing more than struggle among ourselves. They were wrong, because buried beneath their arrogance, beneath their belief that humanity was nothing more than a race of children playing with discarded toys, they had made a mistake. They had underestimated us. It started in secret. A handful of engineers, soldiers, and visionaries came together, not under the banners of nations, not for profit or power, but for one purpose: to prove that humanity was not a race of beggars, but of builders. Piece by piece, they took the scraps, the so-called useless tech, and they began constructing something new, something no one had seen before. A warship, unlike anything Earth had ever dreamed of. They called it Iron Requiem. And when the aliens finally noticed what we had done, it was too late. The first shot that rewrote history wasn't fired in anger. It was fired in defiance. The day Iron Requiem powered up, the universe changed. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't elegant like the ships of our so-called benefactors. It was rough, patched together with scavenged alien alloys and human ingenuity. A monster of steel and fire. The engine cores burned hotter than anything Earth had ever produced. Its weapons were jury-rigged from discarded energy cannons, and its hull was reinforced with plates torn from old war machines. And yet, despite all its imperfections, it was ours. The people behind it had no illusions. They knew what this meant. The moment the aliens realized what we had done, they would not be amused. This wasn't some petty rebellion. This wasn't about defying authority. This was proof, undeniable proof, that humanity wasn't some helpless child in the cosmic scheme of things. We had taken their trash and built a monster. It started with an anomaly. The alien observers, floating in their pristine, untouchable stations above Earth, detected a surge of energy deep in the asteroid belt. Unfamiliar readings, an unusual power signature. At first, they dismissed it as human incompetence. Maybe an experiment gone wrong, another failed attempt to reverse engineer their gifts. But then, Iron Requiem moved. The first test run was simple, nothing more than a drift through the debris field, its engines burning against the void. It should have been impossible. Humans weren't supposed to have ships of this scale, let alone one capable of war. Yet there it was. carving a path through space like a steel leviathan, something born not from privilege, but from sheer, brutal determination. The aliens noticed. A single scout ship, small and sleek, was dispatched to investigate. Its pilot approached cautiously, scanning the structure before it. The readings didn't make sense. This ship was nothing like theirs, an amalgamation of crude technology and mismatched components. But deep inside the scout's calculations, behind all the arrogance, was something else. Fear. The humans weren't meant to be capable of this. Not yet, not for centuries. The scout opened a channel. The message came in their usual diplomatic, measured tone. Humans, this is a violation of the technological regulations. You are in possession of unauthorized constructs. Power down your vessel and prepare for inspection. No response. The pilot repeated the command, this time with a sharper edge. Human vessel, acknowledge. You are in breach of... The ship's cannons roared. A single shot. A blazing spear of energy, burning through the void, slamming into the scout's hull. The impact shattered its shields in an instant, sending it spiraling away, alarms screaming in protest. Humanity had just fired its first shot against the so-called benefactors. The universe would never be the same. The moment that first shot landed, the entire game changed. The scout ship, small and fragile in comparison to the beast we had built, spun wildly as sparks and fire erupted from its damaged hull. It had never expected to be attacked, not by humans. We were supposed to obey. We were supposed to grovel and thank them for their scraps. But today, the rules were rewritten. Inside Iron Requiem, the bridge was deathly silent, save for the hum of its massive engines. Every eye was locked onto the external monitors, watching as the alien scout struggled to regain control. Then, the transmission came through again, but this time there was no arrogance, no condescension, only stunned disbelief. Human vessel, cease fire. This is an act of aggression. Surrender immediately. And Captain Grant, the man who had given everything to see this ship come to life, leaned forward. His voice was calm, steady. No. A pause, a long, tense moment where the entire crew held their breath. Then the alien's voice returned, but there was something new in it, something we had never heard from them before. Panic. You don't understand what you've done. If you resist, there will be consequences. We have protected your species from destruction. Do not throw that away. Grant's expression didn't change. He simply nodded toward the weapons officer. Fire again. This time it wasn't just a warning shot. The plasma cannons roared to life, sending a volley of energy into the crippled scout. Its shields flickered, overloaded, then died completely. The ship cracked, split apart by fire and force, and in an instant it was gone. Nothing but floating debris in the cold vacuum of space. Silence filled the bridge once more. No cheers, no celebrations. Everyone understood what had just happened. We hadn't just fired the first shot. We had drawn a line in the sand. Somewhere, high above Earth, the alien overlords were watching. The moment that Scout's signal cut out, alarms must have blared in their pristine halls. Officers would be rushing to stations, trying to comprehend the impossible. The humans had built a warship. The humans had defied them, and the humans had won. The question now was simple. What would they do about it? The answer came faster than expected. Within an hour, long-range sensors picked up movement. Dozens of signals closing in fast. Not scouts this time, warships, real ones. The benefactors had decided to respond. They were coming. The fleet arrived faster than expected. Within hours of Iron Requiem's first kill, the alien warships surged into the system, dropping out of FTL in tight, disciplined formations. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to remind us of our place. On the bridge of Iron Requiem, every screen lit up with flashing warnings. Sensors screamed as ship after ship materialized, surrounding our position like a steel net. "They brought a damn armada," muttered Lieutenant Harris, eyes darting across the threat display. Captain Grant didn't flinch. "They think we're going to surrender." His voice was steady, cold. "They're about to learn the truth." The alien command ship broadcast its message, its voice deep and resonant, filled with the weight of absolute authority. "Human vessel, you have committed an act of war. Power down immediately, surrender your technology, and submit to our judgment. Resistance will result in annihilation." A tense silence followed. The crew exchanged glances. The message was clear. They weren't just here to destroy Iron Requiem. They were here to crush humanity's spirit. Grant's lips curled into the faintest smirk. He pressed a button on his console, opening a system-wide transmission. Every human colony, every outpost, every satellite tuned in as his voice echoed across the void. "This is Captain Grant of the warship Iron Requiem. For too long we have been told we are weak, that we are unworthy, that our destiny is to kneel." He exhaled slowly. "Today, we say no." A beat of silence. Then he turned to the weapons officer. "Fire." The ship's railguns ignited, hurling kinetic slugs at near-light speeds. They tore through space like meteors, slamming into the lead alien cruiser with unimaginable force. Shields collapsed instantly. A second later, its hull ruptured, spilling fire and debris into the void. The alien fleet hesitated. Just for a moment. And that was all we needed. Engines roared to full power as Iron Requiem surged forward, guns blazing. We weaved through the chaos, dodging plasma blasts and missile swarms, every shot we fired striking with deadly precision. The aliens had come expecting an easy victory. They thought they'd be putting down a disobedient child. Instead, they found something else. They found humanity at war, and we were just getting started. The battle exploded across the void. Plasma beams slashed through the darkness. Railgun slugs ripped into hulls, and missiles screamed through the battlefield, leaving trails of fire and death. Iron Requiem moved like a beast unleashed, darting through the chaos with surprising speed for something so massive. But the aliens had numbers. Too many. For every ship we crippled, more closed in. They fired in coordinated bursts, trying to box us in, trying to overwhelm us. On the bridge, red warning lights flashed as shields buckled under the relentless assault. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the ship trembled from the impact of an enemy torpedo that had nearly breached the hull. "Shields at 30%!" shouted Harris, gripping the edge of his station. "We can't take this forever," another officer yelled. Grant didn't hesitate. "We don't need forever. We just need 5 more minutes." Because while the alien fleet was focused on Iron Requiem, they didn't realize something else had been set into motion. Down on Earth, inside hidden military bunkers, operators were standing by, waiting for the signal. Dozens of planetary defense cannons, once deemed obsolete under alien protection, had been secretly refitted with the very technology they had tried to suppress. And now, they were locked onto the sky. Grant tapped a control on his chair, sending a single coded pulse to Earth. A confirmation. Then he smirked. "Now." Across the planet's surface, the cannons roared to life. Beams of energy and hypersonic projectiles launched into the heavens, ripping into the enemy fleet from below. The aliens never saw it coming. One of their warships, untouched until now, was the first to go, struck directly in its reactor core. It detonated in a violent chain reaction, taking 2 others with it. The battlefield turned into chaos. The aliens scrambled, their formations breaking apart. They had thought this was a simple suppression mission. They had thought Iron Requiem was the only threat. They had thought wrong. And in that confusion, in that moment of hesitation, we struck back. "Full power to forward railguns," Grant barked. The warship surged ahead, its cannons hammering into the disoriented enemy ships. One after another they fell, crippled, burning, retreating. A species that had once pitied us was now running from us. And for the first time in history, humanity wasn't just surviving. We were winning. The tide of battle had turned. What started as a hopeless standoff had become something no one, especially not our so-called benefactors, had predicted. Humanity was fighting back, and we were winning. The alien fleet, once an impenetrable wall of discipline and firepower, was in disarray. Their ships, designed for calculated, overwhelming force, weren't built for chaos. They weren't used to losing. And that's exactly what was happening. On Iron Requiem's bridge, Captain Grant watched the battle unfold with steely determination. The planetary defense cannons were still firing, picking off enemy ships from below, while his own warship tore through their formations like a wolf among sheep. "Enemy fleet down to 47% strength," Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice filled with something approaching disbelief. "They're retreating from high orbit. They're trying to regroup." Grant leaned forward. "We're not letting them." He opened a direct channel to Earth's Defense Command. "Bring the hammer down." Across the surface, the hidden bunkers that had remained dormant for decades came to life once more. But this time, it wasn't just defensive cannons. This time, humanity was sending a message. Dozens of experimental missile silos, long considered useless under alien rule, were activated simultaneously. These weren't ordinary warheads. They had been quietly upgraded with salvaged alien tech, repurposed energy cores, and human ingenuity. And now, they were all locked onto the enemy fleet. In the span of 5 seconds, Earth launched its wrath into the sky. Hundreds of missiles streaked through the void, weaving past wreckage and debris, hunting their targets with terrifying precision. The alien fleet scrambled to react, but it was too late. The first wave struck home, ripping through shield after shield, breaching hulls, detonating inside command centers. Fire and metal bloomed in the vacuum of space as their once mighty warships were torn apart. On board Iron Requiem, the crew watched in stunned silence as the largest of the alien ships, their command vessel, was struck by 3 missiles in rapid succession. Its shields flickered, then failed entirely. A final warhead slammed into its reactor core. For a split second, there was nothing but eerie stillness. Then, the ship imploded, folding in on itself before a blinding explosion consumed it from the inside out. A shockwave rippled through space, scattering debris in all directions. And just like that, their leadership was gone. The remaining alien ships panicked. Some tried to fight, but their weapons were firing wildly, their formations shattered. Others turned and fled, burning hard to escape Earth's gravity well, their once arrogant presence reduced to a desperate retreat. The bridge of Iron Requiem erupted into cheers, but Grant didn't celebrate. Not yet. His eyes were locked on the retreating ships. They wouldn't take this humiliation lightly. This was only the beginning. The remnants of the alien fleet scattered, their once mighty warships limping away like wounded animals. Where they had once hovered above Earth as untouchable overlords, now they fled, their arrogance shattered, their authority burned away in fire and debris. But Captain Grant wasn't smiling. He sat in his command chair, watching the tactical display as the last of their ships vanished into the void. The battle was won, but the war? That was just beginning. "They'll be back," Lieutenant Harris muttered, as if reading his mind. "And next time they won't underestimate us." Grant exhaled. "No, they won't." Across Earth, the world was still processing what had just happened. Every colony, every station, every hidden outpost had watched Iron Requiem and its crew do the impossible. We hadn't just survived an alien assault. We had defeated them. But there was no time to celebrate, because now humanity had a choice. "Sir, incoming message from the Unified Earth Council," the Coam's officer called. "They want a full report and a strategy for what happens next." Grant's jaw tightened. He knew what the politicians would want. A defensive plan. A way to reinforce Earth's position and avoid total retaliation. But that wasn't enough. The aliens had never planned to share the stars with us. They had never seen us as equals. We had been nothing more than an inconvenience, a species to be kept contained, controlled, leashed. Until now. He stood, looking around at his crew, men and women who had risked everything to prove humanity's worth. They were tired, bruised, but their eyes burned with something he hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. No more waiting. No more hiding. It was time to take the fight to them. Grant turned to the comms officer. "Send this message to the council." He took a breath, then spoke the words that would change history. "Earth stands victorious, but victory isn't enough. We have the means, we have the will, and now we have proof that they can bleed. We do not wait for their return. We strike first. Prepare the fleet. Humanity goes to war." The message sent shockwaves through the world. For centuries, humanity had looked to the stars with wonder. We had dreamed of joining some great galactic civilization, of proving ourselves worthy of the cosmos. But the truth was far uglier. The aliens had never seen us as equals. They had come not to uplift us, but to keep us weak, to trap us in the illusion of progress while ensuring we never became a threat. They had ruled us with condescending smiles, enforcing peace by keeping the leash tight around our throats. But now, the leash had been broken, and the masters of the galaxy had no idea what they had unleashed. The Unified Earth Council was in chaos. The battle had been broadcast to every major city, every colony, every hidden outpost that had long suspected the truth. The warship Iron Requiem was no longer just a military asset. It had become a symbol. Half the council wanted to negotiate. They feared retaliation, feared that the full force of the alien empire would crush us before we could even build another warship. But the other half? The other half saw what Grant and his crew had proven. The aliens could be beaten. And if we waited for them to come back, it would be on their terms. "We cannot afford to sit back," Grant's voice rang out in the war room, where Earth's most powerful leaders had gathered. "They'll return, and next time, they won't play games. If we wait, we die. But if we strike first, if we take the fight to them, we have a chance." "Against an interstellar empire?" one of the diplomats scoffed. "That's suicide." Grant didn't blink. "No, it's war, and war is what humanity does best." The room fell silent, because deep down they all knew the truth. From the moment the aliens arrived, we had been living on borrowed time. The only reason they hadn't wiped us out was because they hadn't needed to. But they needed to now. "How?" someone finally asked. "Even if we wanted to fight, how do we go on the offensive? We have one warship." Grant smirked. "We had one warship before the battle. Now we have an entire planet ready to fight." And that was the difference. Humanity had always been at its best with its back against the wall. The moment we realized we had nothing left to lose, we became something the galaxy had never seen before. Something terrifying. Survivors, warriors, predators, and now we had a target. Deep in the outer system, hidden away from prying eyes, a facility came to life. It had been built in secret, a place where human engineers had worked tirelessly to reverse engineer every scrap of alien tech they could get their hands on. Until now, their work had been slow, careful, limited by the fear of discovery. But now they had Iron Requiem. They had wreckage from the battle. They had proof that humanity could do the impossible. And within days, they were building something new, something bigger, something designed for war. 2 weeks after the battle, when the first alien reinforcements arrived, expecting to find a crippled planet and a terrified species, they found something else instead. They found another warship, then another, and another. The first fleet had been built from scraps. The next would be built for vengeance. For the first time in history, Earth wasn't just defending itself. We were coming for them. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The first wave of alien reinforcements entered the system cautiously. Their battle records from the previous encounter told them what they should expect. A single rogue warship, a defiant but ultimately doomed species, a planet still licking its wounds. But what they found was something else entirely. Earth wasn't broken. It wasn't cowering. It was arming itself for war. From the bridge of Iron Requiem, Captain Grant watched as the alien fleet took position just beyond the asteroid belt. Their ships hovered in tight formation, their weapons primed but their movements hesitant. They had learned their lesson. This wasn't going to be a simple suppression mission. A message came through, crisp and cold. Human forces, you have violated interstellar law. Cease all hostilities and submit. This is your final warning. Grant smirked. Final warning? They were still pretending they had control of the situation. He gestured to his comms officer. Broadcast on all channels. A second later, his voice carried through the void, reaching not only the alien fleet, but every human listening from Earth, its colonies, and its secret bases across the system. This is Captain Grant of Iron Requiem. Earth does not recognize your authority. Your rule over us is over. If you want this system, come and take it. The challenge was set. A tense silence followed. Then the aliens fired. Missiles, plasma beams, and kinetic slugs streaked toward Iron Requiem. But this time, she wasn't alone. From behind Earth's moon, 3 newly completed warships emerged, engines flaring. They were smaller than Iron Requiem, less advanced, but they were fast, armed to the teeth and human-built. They cut through the void like wolves descending upon prey. The battle erupted in an instant. The new warships flanked Iron Requiem, unleashing hell upon the alien forces. Their weapons weren't elegant like the enemy's. They were brutal, raw, designed with one purpose: to kill. Railgun slugs smashed through shields, missile barrages scattered enemy formations, and experimental energy cannons, born from stolen alien tech, carved through the darkness. The aliens faltered. For centuries, they had controlled humanity with a single lie: that we could never reach their level, that they were beyond us. And now, for the second time, we had proven them wrong. One of their battleships detonated as a human warship drove straight through its weakened hull, guns firing at point-blank range. Another enemy cruiser, damaged and panicked, tried to retreat, only to be hunted down and ripped apart by our own forces. The tide of war had shifted. And this time, it wasn't just one rogue warship standing against them. It was an entire species. Humanity wasn't fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for dominion. In the alien high command, light years away, the news arrived. A war council convened, their long, sleek forms gathered around a massive holographic display. They stared at the images coming in. Humans, once considered primitive, now standing victorious over 2 of their fleets. One of them finally spoke, their voice slow and filled with disbelief. They weren't supposed to be capable of this. Another, higher-ranked, exhaled. We've made a mistake. A long silence followed. Then, their supreme commander rose from his seat, his expression unreadable. No. His voice was steel. We made them a mistake, and now we will correct it. Across the stars, a full invasion fleet, one large enough to shatter entire civilizations, was mobilized. Humanity had won 2 battles, but now the real war was about to begin. The full invasion fleet arrived 3 weeks later. It did not come with threats. It did not come with warnings. It came with fire. Massive alien dreadnoughts, each the size of cities, emerged from hyperspace, blotting out the stars. Cruisers, battleships, and fighter swarms filled the void, moving with cold precision. The benefactors had finally abandoned their arrogance. This was no longer a punitive strike. This was extermination. On board Iron Requiem, Captain Grant stared at the incoming fleet. His crew had fought impossible battles before, but this was different. The aliens had brought everything this time. "How many ships?" Grant asked, his voice steady. Harris swallowed hard. "Over 200. Maybe more." The war room was silent. Earth's fleet had grown in the past weeks. They had built more warships, upgraded old defense platforms, and rallied every hidden outpost capable of fighting. But even with all that, they were still outnumbered 10-1. For a moment, the weight of it settled over them. The undeniable reality that humanity, despite its defiance, despite its victories, was still a young race standing against an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia. For the first time, someone whispered what they had all been thinking. "We can't win this." A long silence followed. Then Grant spoke. "Then we won't fight to win." Eyes turned toward him. "We fight to change the game." The moment the alien fleet entered high orbit, Earth's defenses opened fire. From the ground, hundreds of missile silos, railgun batteries, and energy cannons unleashed hell. From the void, human warships surged forward, moving in tight formations, targeting enemy weak points with brutal efficiency. The first wave was devastating. Alien ships exploded in fiery blooms, their shields overwhelmed by concentrated fire. Battleships collapsed under relentless missile barrages. Entire enemy squadrons were wiped out before they could even return fire. But then, the main fleet retaliated. And the real slaughter began. The dreadnoughts tore through human lines with terrifying force. Their weapons carved massive holes in Earth's defenses, shattering ships in single blasts. Entire battalions of fighters were erased in the blink of an eye. Earth's warships, for all their newfound strength, were still fragile compared to the might of an ancient empire. One by one, they fell. The Valkyrie went first, caught in the crossfire of 3 enemy cruisers. Its reactors detonated, taking an entire section of the battlefield with it. Then the Argos, overwhelmed by enemy fighters, its hull ripped apart before it could even send a distress call. Iron Requiem fought like a demon, weaving through the chaos, its guns firing non-stop. But even the legendary warship couldn't hold forever. "Shields failing!" someone shouted. "Left thrusters down!" Grant's hands tightened into fists. They were running out of time. Then an alert flashed across the holo display. A private signal. One word. "Ready." Grant inhaled. It was time. He opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships disengage. Fall back to Phase 2 positions." Some hesitated. Others questioned, but they obeyed. And the aliens, believing humanity was finally breaking, pushed forward, eager to land the killing blow, right into the trap. Deep in the asteroid belt, hidden among the debris, something stirred. For weeks, Earth's engineers had worked in secret, repurposing stolen alien technology. They had salvaged cores, rebuilt reactors, modified human weapons into something more. The project had one goal: to build a weapon not just for defense, but for eradication. And now, it was ready. The moment the alien fleet moved into range, Earth's secret fleet, hidden warships equipped with experimental warp drives activated their systems. In an instant, a dozen warships appeared behind enemy lines, not human ships, doomsday ships. Each one carried a stolen alien singularity core, modified into a weapon of mass destruction. Each one was aimed directly at the dreadnoughts. And then, without hesitation, they detonated. The universe itself seemed to crack. 12 artificial black holes ripped through the alien fleet. Dreadnoughts, invincible and unstoppable, were crushed in an instant. Their shields, their armor, none of it mattered against the force of a collapsing singularity. Entire enemy squadrons were sucked into oblivion. Battleships were twisted and shredded before they could even process what was happening. The invincible fleet, meant to end humanity, was gone. In seconds, the battlefield turned from a massacre to something else entirely. A victory, not just for Earth, for humanity's place in the stars. In the alien high command, silence reigned. The Supreme Leader watched the disaster unfold, his long fingers clenched into fists. The mighty armada, his people's greatest force, was gone, destroyed by humans. We underestimated them. A pause. Then the Supreme Leader turned, his eyes cold. No, we miscalculated. And now the mistake will be corrected. Across the galaxy, new orders were sent. The war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The victory was absolute. The alien fleet, once the galaxy's unchallenged enforcers, was shattered, its remains drifting lifelessly in the void. Earth stood bloodied but unbroken, a defiant ember in the dark. But the war was far from over, because now the galaxy was watching. In the days following the battle, Earth's sensors picked up a surge of interstellar activity. Dozens of alien species, once silent under the rule of the so-called benefactors, were now stirring. Some sent encrypted transmissions, their messages wary but intrigued. Others mobilized fleets of their own, either to observe or prepare for what they feared would come next. Because for the first time in history, a species had not only defied the Empire, it had defeated them. On the bridge of Iron Requiem, Captain Grant stared at the holodisplays, watching as intelligence reports flooded in. The Council had gathered in a secure war room back on Earth, and every surviving fleet commander was present. The discussion was heated. "We've won 2 battles, but we can't win a war against an entire empire," one of the senior diplomats argued. "They'll come back in numbers we can't even comprehend." "We don't have a choice," Harris shot back. "If we sit and wait, they'll wipe us out the moment they rebuild." Grant remained silent, listening. The truth was, both sides were right. Earth had just pulled off the impossible. But they were still one planet against a vast empire. They couldn't just defend. They had to change the rules of the war. Finally, Grant spoke. His voice was calm, steady. "We don't need to fight them alone." Eyes turned toward him. "We're not the only ones under their thumb. Every species they've conquered, every world they've strangled under their so-called guidance, they're all watching us right now. And for the first time, they're seeing something new." A pause. Hope. A heavy silence followed. Grant leaned forward. "We don't just fight for Earth anymore. We fight to break their empire entirely. A new war, not just for survival, for revolution, for dominion. Across the galaxy, whispers turned into action. Hidden resistance movements, once too afraid to rise, sent messages to Earth. Rebellions that had been crushed generations ago stirred once more. Some still hesitated, fearful, uncertain if humanity could truly lead the charge. So Earth sent them a message. A single video, broadcast across every secret channel, showing the remains of the alien fleet, the once invincible warships reduced to scrap, their mighty dreadnoughts torn apart by human hands. And with it, a simple declaration. "We are no longer the hunted. We are no longer beneath them. Humanity stands. Join us. On the alien homeworld, the Supreme Leader stood before his war council, his gaze sweeping over his commanders. Their faces were grim. Even the most arrogant among them could no longer deny the truth. The humans weren't an anomaly. They were a problem, a contagion, a spark that threatened to set the entire empire ablaze. The Supreme Leader exhaled slowly, then spoke with finality. Then we burn them first. Orders were given. Across the empire, fleets mobilized, factories roared to life, producing warships faster than ever before. New weapons, ones never before seen, were being developed with a singular purpose: the eradication of humanity. Because if they let Earth stand, if they let humans continue to rise, then it wasn't just the Empire that would fall. It was their entire rule over the galaxy, and that was something they could never allow. Back on Earth, as the first fleets of allied species arrived, hesitant, wary, but willing, Grant stood on the bridge of Iron Requiem, staring into the void. The real war was coming, and humanity was ready. The war came faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, the alien empire unleashed its full might, sending armadas the size of moons to crush Earth before its rebellion could spread. The skies above our planet burned with battle, and for a moment, it seemed like the Empire's will would finally bring humanity to its knees. But we had already changed the game. What had begun as a desperate struggle for survival had become something more: a war of revolution. Humanity was no longer alone. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under the Empire's rule for centuries rose up. Civilizations that had once been cowed into submission now saw what was possible. They saw Earth fight. They saw Iron Requiem carve legends into the void. And they saw something the Empire had spent millennia ensuring no species would ever believe: the gods of the galaxy could bleed. Rebellions exploded across 100 worlds. Supply lines crumbled, entire fleets defected. The Empire, once an unshakable force, found itself facing the one thing it had always feared: an enemy that didn't just resist, but refused to lose. And in the final battle, as the Empire's homeworld itself burned, it became clear. This wasn't just Earth's war anymore. It was humanity's ascension. When the dust settled, the Empire was gone. Its leaders either dead or in hiding, its fleets scattered, its legacy reduced to whispers in the dark. And standing at the heart of it all, among the wreckage of a fallen dynasty, was Earth. A species that had once been given scraps, a species that had been told it would never amount to anything, a species that had taken its first steps into the stars, not as servants, not as victims, but as conquerors. Humanity had rewritten history, and the galaxy would never forget it.